Hey there. We are back. So this is the Musicians Personal Development Podcast, and I am CC Bass.
And this is Wil Cameron. And
That's
we
right.
are
the Musicians Personal Development Podcast, or MPD Podcast. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered, have you ever gone to a concert and you've seen a performance where, you know, as soon as you got there, it captured your attention, and all throughout the performance, your attention was captured? So today we are going to talk about tips to help with that if you're looking to achieve that and wondering why you can't get that. So today's topic is about communicating through the music, and how to do that and get people's attention. So, but before we get into it, be sure, if you like this podcast, to subscribe at the link below on YouTube at MPD Podcast, and also like us on Facebook at MPD Podcast. And if you want to send us messages or have questions or want to share your story, you can email us at mpdpodcast@gmail.com. So, I love this topic of communication through music because I am one of those people that wholeheartedly believes that playing music is just like having a conversation. Now, I'm kind of speaking in terms of more of like the jazz and the pop music arena. So I'm not that versed in the I would say the classical
orchestral stuff. Yes,
orchestral stuff. So might have to bring on an expert for that. Actually, Wil, you might be able to talk a little bit about that because I know you have experience with that. But in the realm of pop music and jazz, if you've ever seen me on a gig and you've heard me speak, or even on a previous podcast, I've drawn the relationship between speaking and playing music and speaking that way and doing communication. And for me, when I'm on the stage and playing, it's just like hanging out and having a conversation with the other musicians. That's exactly what it looks and feels like to me. And it really kind of helps take any kind of nerves out of it because I'm just hanging out, having a conversation, and having a conversation with the audience. And it's all done through the music. We're not actually talking. We're using body cues. We might use a bit of verbal cues, but
right.
There's so many different ways that you can communicate. Just like if you're using your language, there's so many different ways to communicate. You could use slang, you could tell a joke, and all of that for me it's happening on stage. So just if you wanted to know, like, what's really going on up there between these musicians? Well, we're having a good time. We're having a conversation.
And if anybody ever sees you in person, they would know that, and it is contagious. It is very contagious.
Yeah. So, Wil, tell us why this topic is important.
Well, first I want to start by saying this is an example of a topic that one of our viewers gave us. One of my musician buddies sent it in, and we were talking. He had watched all the podcasts and said, "Hey, I got a great idea." So, I mean, this is great. So this is special to me for that reason as well. But this is important because we're talking about communication. And I don't care if you work as an auto mechanic or whatever. Communication is the number one challenge everywhere. Whether you're in a business, whether you're talking about a relationship, if you're starting a global war with somebody, it's very important. Communication, everybody always struggles with that. It's especially important in the live situations like what Cece's talking about there. It's also important not to just focus on ourselves when we're having the communication. We'll talk about that. If you want to relate it directly to music, you're talking about it's like the beat or the rhythm or the pitch or the structure of the music and things like that we're using in context to relate the ideas of music or whatever it is that we're playing. It could be like with one instrument. It could be with several instruments. It could be people taking turns or trading fours that, we do in the jazz stuff. But there's this connection between communication and music. And I would love to. I'm not going to have time or permission to do it now. But I would love to talk to you about how drums were used. Drums are the oldest instrument. It's been proven, 5500 BC. Don't have time to talk about it now, but drums were used to communicate. So there's a part of me that really wants to talk about that. In the same way drums were used to communicate then, we as musicians today, even if you're a new musician, you're using your instrument to communicate with people. So it is utterly important to being like your best musician self. And there are some rare occasions where, even when introverted people come on stage, they may not have much of a presence, but their instrument does the speaking for them. So it's very essential to being that well-rounded total musician.
That's great. And we could talk about that drumming stuff when you when you get your own podcast. All right. So, where do you want to go next? Do you want to share some of our best tips?
Why don't we talk about? Let's do some examples. So,
okay.
I have this really crazy. One of my buddies had this really crazy example. And, we were at a gig and we were talking about how loud it was and we couldn't hear. And, there's always monitors and stuff like that. You're on the stage, you're playing, but there might be some monitors so you can hear yourself. And he was saying, yeah, man, we bought these really cool in-ear monitors and, so it would be really quiet and stuff on the stage and we're playing and stuff. And he said, we noticed, I think it was the guitar player. The guitar player, he just kind of clicked off. He's got his in-ear monitors in, and he's just playing, and he's just kind of just listening to himself. And my buddy said, I had to create a second channel. I had to create a channel specifically for him so I could talk to him in his in-ears because he totally got lost. He stopped communicating. He totally got lost in just being able to listen to himself and listen to himself play as if he had forgotten he was performing for people. So that's not the best way to communicate. So I know you've got a couple of stories too, right?
I do. When I say I bring it back to language, when I'm performing, I think about someone who's giving a public speech, and they're standing up there, and would you be attracted to someone or listen to someone who's just sitting there talking like this, or if they're sitting there talking like this? You want to be entertaining, so people have something visually appealing to look at. And I'm going to share with you my best tip that I knock it out the ballpark every time, that I love to use. But I love to use that example because playing music and connecting with the audience is the same way. So I love to be able to draw that connection, so it kind of brings it home.
Yeah, this is actually our podcast number 5 is actually the building block for this, that connecting to the audience. If you haven't listened to that, go back and check that out. It gives some very basic elements that is really helpful. And, this is primarily for musicians, but anybody who does public speaking, there's some elements in that number 5 podcast where we talk about it. I didn't realize this was a fact, but public speaking is probably the number one fear that people have. And I don't see a whole bunch of people doing a lot of public speaking, so it was surprising to me that was people's number one fear. I think that spiders or lions or whatever would be something scarier to most people.
No, it's actually people being fear of being judged. So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing. So, but yeah, so why don't we go into the tips? So let's do this way. So I got a couple of things that I do, and Cece, why don't you share maybe something a couple that you do, okay?
Okay, sure. So go first.
Okay, I will go first. So so we want to. The way I do it is I prepare to communicate, and I use this thing where big eyes, big ears, where it's you want to, before you begin to address somebody else with a conversation, you kind of check yourself. You think what am I going to say? So as I play, I'm a drummer, so by applying this to my instrument, then I think about, okay, so is my instrument set up the right way? Do I see where everybody is? Can I actually make eye contact with people? Can I, with a glance, see if somebody is looking at me? So, and this is just in the band. You wouldn't want to set up where somebody's music stand is like blocking them and you're doing that while you're trying to play. That's really uncomfortable. So big eyes, big ears, making sure you can find the band members and at a glance, make sure they can see you. And that kind of bleeds into my next tip, which is like, once you establish that and you're prepared to talk, then you begin to pay attention to things beyond yourself. By that I mean dealing more with being aware of how you sound in the mix, being aware of the audience. There's like a really think of it like this. Not being aware of a special moment that's going on right there in front of you. If somebody's like really into a song and they're dancing and they're all out and they're just like having a great time, don't be so caught up in your own strategy like, okay, so we're going to do this tune, then we're going to do that tune, and then we're going to take a break, where you're not even paying attention to the audience that, they're having a moment there. You're like 3 or 4 people over in the corner like dancing or doing something.
That's a good one.
You always want to be aware of that. And we've all seen that where it's like, oh, man, they just got up to start dancing.
Right.
So, but yeah, you just want to acknowledge that kind of stuff and not miss those opportunities, because that makes, we're trying to do this to present, like what you were talking about, CC. Nobody wants to listen to like somebody who's like looking away or not paying attention to them. So what are your strategies?
Well, of course there is the preparation, and that is very important, absolutely, because that'll take a lot of the stress and, just being prepared to play. But my top strategy that I use is my secret sauce, I like to say. It's not really a secret, but is to use the physiology. So I use my body.
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking about how a speaker would give a speech. When somebody's up there speaking, they're not just speaking like this. They're up and they're giving eye contact, and they're making eye contact with the audience. I could be the most prepared, but if I am doing this and I'm just looking down, it doesn't matter, So I need to be doing other things to connect. So physiology is mine, and I'm going to break that down into 3 parts. The first one is it might sound obvious, but face the audience. Very important. There are studies that show that you're more connected to somebody if your belly button is facing them. Or you can Google it and find out stories about that. But that's very important, because oftentimes I'll see like on the stage where sometimes people actually have their back faced towards the audience, and I don't know when it's ever a good time to do that. You're not, once you do that, you turn around, you're not connecting with the audience. Mm-hmm. So you want to definitely face them. You want to look at them. Look, see who's out there. Look, and look at the other musicians too. And the last one there is to smile. Smile. My dad used to tell me, CC, it doesn't cost 2 cents to smile. Or the whole saying, smile and the whole world smiles with you, is so very much true in music. And I knock this out the ballpark every time. I have seen like Grinches on the stage that are just like, and I just look at them and I smile, and then they start smiling back, and it brings the barriers down. They start to ease up, and the music starts to breathe, and it's freaking fun. And the ripple effect is out in the audience, because they can feel it and they can see that we're having fun. So that's what I love, and that's why I love to play music, because I live for that connection. I'm more of a performer than I am a recorder. So so as you can see, I'm very passionate about that. Is. So that's my top number 1 tip. I'll give you.
It's not made up, folks. It's not made up. She's really that way.
Yeah, I'll give you an example.
Goes crazy.
So last weekend I played with this trio, and usually I don't name the musicians, maybe to kind of protect them, but I think I'm gonna give them a shout out. So Higher Standards, thank you for letting me sit in last weekend. So I subbed with them. I hadn't played with them since like 4 years, and I didn't play with them a whole lot. It was just subbing in, and no rehearsal or anything. We just got up there and we played and we did our thing. And I always loved playing with them because we have this thing called chemistry. And, chemistry in relationships certainly applies here in music. And you probably heard me say that before too. But we very much have a chemistry between the three of us when we're playing. And we know how to leverage that and use that to our advantage. So with no rehearsal, we pulled off some amazing stuff, knowing exactly when the music's going to switch around and when to come down.
Right.
Without even, I didn't even, the funny thing is, I didn't even have to look up. At one point, I was down just like this, and we ended up in the same place. So there's like these body cues that are happening, these nonverbal cues that are happening, and it's kind of an energy that is being exuded. And part of that, I really don't know how to articulate all of that. It just happens. It's kind of like when somebody walks into the room and you say like, oh, you know what? You know when that person walks into the room because they're exuding so much energy
right.
and so much brightness. It's kind of like you don't really know how to explain it, but they just do.
Right. And that walking into the room, that takes us right back to the top where we started. Do you ever wonder how an artist can just keep everybody captivated? And everything you're talking about is just stepping all over my what I led with, like preparing to communicate and paying attention to people beyond yourself. It's just little, and it seems like really basic stuff. I promise you, it seems like really easy stuff. But I've actually played a gig where the keyboard player was hiding behind his music stand. He wasn't trying to hide behind his music stand. He just when I first set up, he was one way, and then he adjusted his stand, and then he was missing. So for the whole gig, I couldn't see him. And right. If you're going to be your best musician self, you have to be able to do that. You all know I'm a cyclist. Well, if you didn't, you do now. And there have been studies that show that a group of cyclists ride a lot more efficiently and faster than a single cyclist, even if they're professionals. And that goes for everything. A team of people is much better than a single person as it relates to that. I'm not saying there's an issue with solo artists because they are phenomenal. But they too have a team. If you're a solo person, then you've got an engineer usually, or a DJ, or if you're a vocalist with no music, your audience is your team. So rarely, unless you're just singing for yourself, and if you're just singing for yourself, you're still doing number one because you're listening to yourself. So it's just very important. If you miss every other tip, just remember that communication is the thing that everybody struggles with. Whether you have a job, whether you're in school, we spend more time trying to refine our process for communication than we do with anything else, inclusive of workflow. So we want you to take these couple of points that we've provided today and try to put them into action as best as you can. Yeah,
and I say don't try, do it. Just go in and do it, but you got to do it every day. You got to do it every performance. Day. Don't just do it once. So that's some of these things you might hear us repeating over because that's what we need. Because as humans, we tend to forget. Yep. So definitely apply these and practice them every day.
Well, that's a wrap, CC. You have anything else you want to run over real quick?
So I think that's about it and about all we have time for today. So if you like what you heard, again, you could like us on Facebook. We're at MPD Podcast, and also on Instagram at MPD Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube. And also, if you have ideas for a show, if you just want to share your story, we love to hear stories too, because we're all going through something, and we have something that is relatable. So just send us an email at mpdpodcast. mpdpodcast@gmail.com.
Correct. It's easy for you to say. Please subscribe, and we will catch you the next time we are. Do you want to say we're out of here?
We are out of here. All right. See you next time.
See ya.
Where's my music?